Welcome back, everyone, on Blockchain Rock. We're here with a very special guest today, Maximilian Rofagha. Is that how you pronounce it?
Yes, well done. Yeah, absolutely.
So, so Maximilian is the CEO and founder at Finimize. Now, I'm very excited because I've been a subscriber of Finimize myself for a number of years. For those that don't know, Finimize started out, at least that I know, as a newsletter, providing financial, information on the financial market, but in a very accessible way. So, I don't have a financial background. I now work in finance, and I think like Finimize really helped me bridging the gap between being someone completely outside of the market to understanding market dynamics and like how a certain event might influence the market, coming from a company. This is increasingly important as we'll go into during this episode and explain why. But effectively nowadays, finance is such an important aspect of our life and of our culture. It really forms part of our pop culture, our news and all what's happening on social networks. So I really believe that the role of Finimize is becoming increasingly important, not just to understand the financial market, but really to understand the world. So Max, look, it's really a pleasure to have you here today. Thank you so much for coming. And if you want to give us a brief introduction about yourself, your past experiences. I know that before Finimize, you've also been you've also successfully created a startup, and if I'm not mistaken, you sold it. So if you give us just a little bit of a background, and then we'll go into the different aspects that we wanted to explore today.
Yeah, sure. So my name is Max. I'm originally from Berlin and studied in the US and in the UK, and really only have worked in a normal job for 1 year out of my entire career. And other than that, I've been in the startup space all of my life, or all of my career life. Previously built an e-commerce business based out of Zurich. Built one of the largest e-commerce businesses in the country there. Then we sold the company to the largest media house. And then I started to build Finimize, very much out of a very personal frustration that I'd experienced when I had built up some savings and wasn't really sure what to do with those savings, and found it really difficult to wrap my head around it, and found the market really, really convoluted. And now with Finimize, I've been really on this mission to empower people to become their own financial advisors by giving them access to information and tools that they normally wouldn't have access to in a really bite-sized and jargon-free way. And along the way, we then very naturally, and we can talk about that as well, built up a community. And interestingly, last year we had the largest financial gathering in the entire world by attendance. Actually, we had the number of attendees that we brought together to the meetups that our community hosts were as large as the 5 largest combined.
Wow.
So it's taken up a really nice momentum, all organized completely by our own community. So that gives you, in a nutshell, hopefully a bit of background.
That's so one of the aspects that interests me the most about Finimize is that how long ago did you start it? So when did you start?
So I originally started it as a bit of a side project, and then officially started it at the end of 2016.
So one thing that I find extremely interesting is that you were very, very early on so you started adopting newsletter as a form of, I'd say, marketing, or as a way to reach out to your customers very early on. We're talking about 2016, 2017. Emails were not deemed to be, at least, to the average user, they were not, I think, deemed to be the kind of the cool, or like, pass me the term, the sexy side, the sexy type of communication. Everyone was still on Facebook in 2016, 17. It was very much on the business side, Twitter, of course. But it's very interesting because nowadays all I see really is, influencers and businesses and marketing outlet encouraging companies to build up newsletter databases because they are so valuable, because you create such a strong connection with your community. And in your case, I think this is well evidenced by, for example, the event that you just mentioned. Like they feel much more participant to the life of your company. So I feel that's really interesting. And I mean, I don't know if I guess that sometimes it just comes out of intuition, but were there any particular thought? Is it something that actually you considered when you were thinking about, okay, how should I go about that? So I decided to
Mm,
simplify information, which again is also another. It's always been important, but I think that in the past couple of years, this has become increasingly important given the amount of the volume of information that is out there. People that break down complex topics into biteable size are so valued. So, like, how was it? Pure intuition? Was there like a thinking process behind it?
mhm, mhm. I would love to sit here and say that I saw this coming, but the honest answer is I just leaned in very closely to our users and the demand. So essentially, what happened was that I started off actually with a WordPress website that I built myself,
Mhm.
and we started posting the bite-sized content onto the WordPress website, and the format and the type of content from day one has been what it is today. So that's there. I would say I had a really good intuition, if you will, around like what resonates with users. But reality was that when I posted the stuff on the website, nobody came to the website. It was crickets. And then I started emailing everybody, all of the people that I had in my contact book, being like, check out my new website. And I found that people would open the email, but they wouldn't actually go to the website. And so then basically what that led me to do is I just took the content from the website and put it into the email because I knew that
I
they're going to
love
open
that.
the email. And so that then gave birth to the newsletter. And it was never sort of the idea that we're going to create a newsletter, but like that is how the inception happened. And the, I'm really grateful for it because it's a very, very, as you said, it's a very, very powerful channel. And I think back in the day when people were producing content, certainly when we started out, I remember we were speaking to some investors and they were like, why news, why email? Like it's not the sexiest channel right now. Why are you not producing this on Snapchat? Or why are you not producing this on Instagram, whatever? And then you started to see that the reason why, and which is that all of these media businesses went out of either went out of business, like a Mike.com, or just massively reduced their valuations because they started to produce the content and push it into social media channels like Facebook, etc. And the reality was that they didn't actually have any kind of customers, right? Like
They're
the
reliant on
one
the social network
exactly,
to be able
and then
to.
Facebook, in the example of Mike.com, Facebook changed the algorithm of how videos work, and I think overnight they basically lost like half of their revenue. Um, and so I think for us it's been a really really powerful channel because we own that direct client relationship. We're not dependent on a Facebook or on a Snapchat or on a TikTok or whatever. We have that direct channel, which I think is super valuable. And then the second thing is, if you think about it, there's email. The amazing thing about email is that everybody has it, and there's very very little friction. So we know from our users, this is what happens is that they wake up in the morning, they open their emails, and boom, Finimize is at the top of their inbox. And so you don't need to download anything. You don't need to change your behavior.
Yeah.
It's established user behavior, and we're sliding into your established user behavior. And that's why it's so powerful.
Is there like, because of course as we mentioned, you've been a very early adopter, and I think I don't want to put the success that you had and that you still have down to the newsletter format only, at least because I think that I'm bombarded by newsletters, and
Mm,
I find 99.9 of these newsletter incredibly annoying and taxing because as you said, it's an established behavior, but I think it is becoming increasingly almost viewed as something that people want to walk away from, like the
Mm.
inbox, the dreading the inbox,
Yeah,
all of the.
totally.
But for me, of course, Finimize does not really form, like, I don't view it as a marketing newsletter.
Yeah,
I view it as really free, valuable content that is dropped on me in a time where, and it sounds like this is sponsored video, but like, when we spoke before, like, I
go
said the
for it.
same. It's, it's, I think it's very valuable, especially nowadays where you hear, because finance is part of, pop culture, and we'll go into that in a little bit, but it's so hard to understand what information to rely on, and
Yeah.
I think it's also very hard to find people that are willing to break down information in a very objective manner without, trying to write catchy titles to increase the engagement. And you don't need that. So you already have your customer, you're sending them an email, you want your content to be good, you don't want your content to be inflammatory, or you don't need your content to be, provocative, so that it increases the click rate. So I think it's very important to have these kind of news outlets, because it's very hard, even for me, and I work in financial services industry, to find a reliable source of information that doesn't overpromise, that doesn't, like, just something that you can read through and kind of learn, okay, what has happened, what are the potential implications of that, okay, that's it. And then you form, with as little as an opinion in terms of, political opinions, or like, this is right, this is wrong, like more of an objective kind of analysis of the events that are occurring in the world and how that can affect the financial market. I think it's extremely valuable. And actually, this leads me to a point.
It's great.
I
It's a
know
great
that.
pitch. I love it. I'm glad it's recorded, so I'll review it afterwards.
You'll use it, but I trust me, I do really stand behind behind
Yeah,
all what I said. Like, that's why
yeah,
I've been using it for years.
yeah.
And I know that, also one thing that you're doing, which is kind of different from other news outlets, you're not really employing journalists, like you're employing, if I'm not mistaken, ex Wall Street analyst or analyst within the stock market, rather than journalists. So that's very interesting, because I guess it has pros and cons. Why did you decide that, and how has that, been? How's the experience, of having
Mhm,
analysts producing content?
mhm. Um, so, so I think I hope there's not too many journalists listening. But but we've made the experience. So from day one, we've had ex bankers produce the content.
Mhm.
That's just, I think, what set the bar. We found that because of the structure, for those of the listeners who are not familiar with us, we tend to, in most of the content that we produce, not all of it, we always answer three questions: what's going on here, what does this mean, and why should I care? And the reason why people tend to really like Finimize is because we answer this question: why should you care? Like, why should you care if interest
You
rates are
start with
going up
why,
or
huh?
going down, etc.? Exactly. um because we found, like, in my personal experience, it's like, it's one thing to actually understand, okay, like the Fed is going to now increase interest rates. I get it. I understand what's happening. It's another thing to then understand, why do I care? I'm not sitting in America. Why do I care about that? And I think, in order to really explain that, we made the experience from day one, really, that you need people who've worked in the industry to really explain the context, to help you connect the dots. And some of the journalists that we've interviewed for this kind of position, they were really good at sort of summarizing what happened, but they weren't actually able to explain why it was happening, or why it affects you. Which shows that there's, like, sort of, if you differentiate between sort of primary and secondary levels of understanding. So I think we really need someone who has a primary, who can think of, like, first principles, if you will. And to be clear, I think if we were, for example, an investigative news outlet, or if we were breaking news outlet, 100% we would hire journalists.
Journalists,
So
yeah.
I have nothing personally at all against journalists. I love them. I think they're an amazing profession to have. It's just, for the analysis that we needed people who had a lot of domain expertise. And we hire equity research analysts, and they obviously produce a lot of content for banks and for funds, and what have
Yeah.
you. And so we've found that these people are the best people that we can hire within our organization.
But these kind of, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, I'm not very familiar with how it works and
Hmm.
how this particular role works within banks and investment
Hmm.
funds. But aren't these kind of like form of internal content, and aren't they very technical in nature? So was it a bit of a learning curve for these people that you've hired to be able to communicate with the public, so with people that are not as sophisticated as their colleagues?
Yeah.
Is that, because I can see that could be a challenge.
Yeah. So I think, again, I'm also not a research equity research analyst by background, but from my understanding, there's a lot obviously of internal research that then informs perhaps the sales team or the trading floor.
Okay.
But they also obviously publish a lot of these pieces for thought leadership when they give their buy, hold, sell recommendations, stuff like that. I think is also public to a certain extent. And yes, I think there's definitely a certain style and a certain format that we produce. And the way that we structure the team is we basically have these analysts, they bring all the knowledge, and then we have editors, and editors make sure that the analysts
Okay.
remove the jargon and basically speak in a way that you and I are speaking right now, just conversational.
Yeah.
And cut out all the BS and just really explain it to me as though you were talking to a friend in a pub.
And again, I think that this is so important. I'm a fan of social media. I really like marketing as a discipline. I think it's so interesting. It touches upon, a multitude of things, empathy, psychology. So, but I think that what I'm seeing right now, and I think it's kind of the Gary Vee phenomena, is everyone is just becoming a news outlet, and very few are contributing with kind of either explaining, as you said, why is that important. Like for example, I'm very passionate about augmented reality, and it's not exploded yet, not to the level of NFTs.
Really? Why?
Certainly.
I'm curious. Why? I recently, just as this is a tangent, but I recently got a virtual reality headset, and
Okay.
I'm totally into virtual reality now. I think this is the future.
Okay.
So I'm curious to hear why augmented reality.
Why?
Yeah.
So I think that the main difference is that virtual reality, you're limited to being completely immersed in the experience. But augmented reality could potentially, if you kind of tune it up all the way, you could potentially get the same as virtual reality. But at the same time, you can also create a kind of like the mixed reality, like a 50-50 sort of mix between reality and the virtual information. Now, I think that there have been, I think, three arguably type of user interfaces, starting with the punched paper, on the computer, and moving on to line of codes. Then, of course, the graphical user interface, which is what we use right now on the computer. Arguably, there has been, I think you can already deem it as part of augmented reality, but there has been all of the Siri and Alexa out of the audio interface, let's say. But augmented reality, I think, will really revolutionize the way we interface and relate to information. So right now we're just, and even when we look at Minority Reports and these movies, we really just see the user interface that we're using nowadays only like floating in the form of hologram. But I think that's kind of it doesn't fully express the potential of the technology. And I think it's also coming fairly soon. You have like big companies investing. Microsoft just come out with, Apple is investing, of course, and they come out with the patent like a couple of weeks ago. Microsoft today,
Snapchat obviously is massive.
Snapchat, yeah. So exactly, all of these applications that right now look just entertainment, like, oh, okay, I'm gonna put a filter of a cute dog over my face or something like that. What really they're doing, they're refining the LiDAR technology, and they're refining really the processing on the software side, because once you have the goggle, you don't really want to go through the same chunky experience. You want it to be seamless, because you're already trading off comfort, in the form of, I have to wear something on my face, and you want to make sure, in my opinion, to get a very good quality as a trade-off. So if you look at, so to go back to your question, and just as one of the many examples that I think you could make, if you look at Pokemon Go, what happened, right? So the big problem of suddenly you have a house with a garden, and there is a Pokemon in your garden, and you have like children and adult alike climbing the fence and coming in to catch the Pokemon. Now, because of this combination between geolocation and augmented reality, which is great. The problem is right now you don't have a right as a, at least in the UK, as a landowner or leaseholder, as the owner of a house, over the geolocated and virtual space around your house, right? Which is crazy, because what happened if I attach in the virtual space an offensive, an offensive logo or something, maybe, recalling World War II kind of iconography or things like that. You have no right now. But
Mm.
the solution will be in the form of, I think, an NFT. And what that will allow you to do, for example, if you live central, is to license your virtual space for advertisers. So advertisers are going to be able to communicate through augmented reality in ways that we haven't experienced before. So, like, for example, with the electric car, jingles are going to become, I think, increasingly important in identifying what car you're driving. And, there is going to be the Ferrari jingle, or like, jingle make it sound terrible, but, in Italian say rombo, and rombo means like, the roar of the engine. Now, when you have an electric engine, that cannot happen. But I think when you enter the digital realm, it becomes way easier to distinguish yourself from other brands, because you're not limited anymore by the kind of constrictions that exist in the physical world. Brand communication could be huge, and also augmented reality is not only a stimulus in terms of visual. It's, it wants to stimulate all of the five senses. So I think,
I guess it's the question of like how so I think there's a lot of examples of like science fiction movies then becoming reality. So you mentioned Minority Report. When I put on like the Oculus Rift, for me, I immediately think of Matrix, where they lie down and then they like dock in the back. Because I've shown the Oculus Rift to a couple of people, and every person, when they put it on for the first time, it's just wow. Like even my parents, like they're not early adopters, but they put it on and they're like, wow, this is incredible. And I think the question ultimately will be, will life after the vaccines and after COVID become more normal? Then I could see this argument for augmented reality. But if we continue to do much more work from home, etc., like I could see people going on holidays in virtual reality, right? Because like even I was the other day I found this video, and I went skydiving in Slovenia in virtual reality. And it was a really simple thing, but it was just, it's incredible. And so I think the possibilities that you have, the possibilities are endless, and you're going to end up then with this Matrix question. I think from a societal point of view, probably I would prefer to live in augmented reality than in virtual reality, because at the end of the day, then we're all gonna sit in a dark room with the virtual reality headset on. That's not kind of the society that we should be striving for. So I think it really depends on what's going to happen now after this whole COVID thing.
I think it's really interesting what you said, because one of the things that I find the most incredible with virtual reality is that it's fake, and yet your body reacts to it. So like when you go on a roller coaster, it's fake, and yet like you feel that impulse of, so you understand how little control you have over kind of like the how your body reacts to certain stimuli. And also I think what's interesting is that you said after COVID. I can definitely see, before COVID, actually, I was leaning toward, this type of argument, because I was thinking, okay, everyone is moving into the city. The houses are becoming increasingly smaller. Now there is also this whole topic about, the environment and not polluting. So traveling is really discouraged. And, I wouldn't be surprised if, 10, 15 years from now, there are going to be some regulation that limits the carbon footprint allowed for each person. Now there are already like carbon credits applied to companies. They're not 100% enforceable. It's kind of more of like, I don't want to say an opt-in, but it's hard to enforce, because each jurisdiction, wants to compete with the others, and it's hard to go to to developing countries and say like, no, now you cannot pollute because we've done it 50 years ago, so now you shouldn't. It's very hard, and there is a lot of political friction in that. But I wouldn't be surprised, given how much importance society is placing on this debate right now, if we were limited to a certain amount of carbon footprint a year. So, okay, you have this allowance of carbon footprint. So when you take a flight, you're consuming X amount, right? And I think that is a very scary, to me, that is a very scary kind of like future to think of, because technologies like the blockchain and crypto, they can be liberating, but they can also become very heavy handcuffs, because
Hmm.
it allows you to track everything. So in a world that is so interconnected and so, we're giving a lot of freedom away. And I'm not an anarchist or anything like that, but I do think that there is that kind of like dystopian
Yeah,
bracket that you can think of.
yeah,
On the other end, I think it can be amazing for a series of other uses. Like virtual reality, again, allows you to be immersed in the content. And I know that it's been used, for example, to create more empathy toward immigrants, for example, in far right movements, or like to help understand, traumas, or help solve them. I know it's a bit, the thing is, it's a very powerful technology, and I think both, there is a use case for both virtual and augmented reality.
yeah,
The augmented
yeah,
reality standpoint, I see it as, again, as the name suggests, to augment your day to day. So I
yeah.
don't think we'll have computers really, like screens, in 15 years or so. But yeah, virtual reality, I completely take your point. I think, and I do think that you'll have like a total recall type of experience. You go there, like you go on holiday for a week, and
Yeah, but even think about it like for like senior citizens, right? Like they can't go
Oh
anywhere.
wow,
Like then you can have a holiday, or they can, I don't know, sit at home with a family who might not live super close, and like that. I
yeah,
think that
that's
can be
true.
quite powerful. And then now you're seeing, forget the name of this, but there's, as everybody isn't going to the gym, they're doing it at home. There's a gym in virtual reality, and like there's
Oh
a couple of
wow.
use cases for that that I think are quite exciting. But anyway, I think it's a
Yeah, no,
massive tangent that I pushed you onto,
no, no,
but
no,
it's an
but it's
interesting
it's really really
conversation.
interesting, and unfortunately, I start speculating a lot when we speak about this topic. But I think, like, to answer briefly to what you said, I think branding is the immediate kind of like strength of augmented reality and what people will exploit. But
Yeah,
let's see.
yeah.
So we touched upon a little bit, going back on the finance and the role of Finimize. There is a topic which I absolutely enamored with, and we had the chance to briefly speak about it, before recording the episode, which is, when I was at university,
Hmm.
okay, a few years ago. I remember people, when I was in London, I remember people coming to university from the city, interviewing us, asking us about, oh, what are you millennials interested in, because we have a problem. We see that millennials are not really interested in the financial market. They're not investing, they're not putting money aside. And now on the other end, you see a very great participation from the millennial from the
Hmm.
millennial generation. Problem is a different type of participation than what the financial market is accustomed to. It is
Yeah.
hectic, it is rushed, it is emotional, it is passionate as well. I'm not saying this just to in a pejorative manner. I think those are qualities that could be also good in certain, like, when inserted in placed in certain context. But I do
Totally.
think that the financial market is not really ready to deal with this kind of energy, and so do you have any thought about that? Because I think it's quite of an interesting fact.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree. I think the first time we saw this was in 2017 when the first Bitcoin and crypto hype started.
Mhm.
And I remember people were very judgmental, that people are putting money into this and they have really no clue what they're doing. And I'm not a huge investor in crypto myself, so I think I have a fairly neutral point of view here. Um, and and I think people just were judgmental because they thought this was like something that is not an established form of finance. But I think in reality, what happened is it entered, or it allowed a completely new group of our population to access and get interest in the financial markets. And so I think definitely that was like a moment where I think the younger generation, like ourselves, said, "Hey, you can't dismiss this as like some crazy irrational thing. Yes, there's a lot of noise here, and not everybody here is a good person and a good investor and
Yeah.
whatever. But you can't dismiss the whole thing, right? Like there's this. Perhaps our parents perhaps got into it by, I don't know, buying a house. That's how they got into the whole financial market in order to buy a house. But the entry point for this generation might be crypto, and I think we just have to accept that that's a new entry point. That's not good or bad. It's something completely new, and we can either embrace it or we can put our head in the sand. And I
Yeah.
think now we're starting to see the same thing with this whole Wall Street bets hype and frenzy. So it's really easy to say like, oh, they're all crazy, you know? And I think, again, when we talk about this a lot also with our analysts within the company, and we take it very, very seriously what happens there, and we want to lean into the conversation, and we want to be part of the conversation, and we want to not say, hey, this is junk that's happening here, because what we found is like 10 to 20% of what's being said in these forums, for example, is actually very well thought out, and you might agree or disagree, but it's not. It's a very well thought out piece of investment thesis, and I think maybe 80 to 90% then is quite noisy, and I think that's then what gives it a bad reputation.
Yeah.
But there's something there, and I think what we are seeing is that we describe this as the rise of the casual investor. So the casual investor is someone who wants to take an active role in their investments. We're always taught you should invest in something and then let it be completely passive. And a couple of years ago, there was a huge rise of like robo advisors, and I think people are kind of over it. People want to take a more active role because they're interested in it, they're passionate about it, as you said, they have fun with it, and now the way that we see this is they have different behaviors to previous investors. So the casual investor, 90% of them, from the research that we did with our own community, they take into account social recommendations, and they speak with their friends before they make an investment decision, or they speak with other people who are like them. It doesn't have to be their friends. So the social component, the community component, is a massive, massive driver of behavior. And again, you can now say, well, that's not the right way to invest, but it is the way it is. And for some people, it actually works out quite well. I was reading this study the other day from a UCLA professor who looked into Robinhood investors. And what he found was that actually the individual Robinhood investor wasn't sort of outstanding, but the cohort of Robinhood investors was better than the traditional S&P 500 or the traditional finance finance professional.
Or
exactly. So they actually outperformed the S&P 500, and he looked at it for like multiple years, and his conclusion was that this is because there is a power in the intelligence of the crowd, and I think that's the really interesting thing, right? It's like if you can crowdsource intelligence, that's when you start to get really, really powerful behavior. And then the second piece that we're seeing is that people want to take an active role, but they only want to do this perhaps 10 to 15 minutes a day. And so that's, for example, with Finimize, we're very focused on delivering bite-sized content that fits into that 15-minute slot per day. And they don't want to sit down and don't want to read Financial Times or Wall Street Journal or whatever it is that the older generation used to read, because their lifestyle is different. They're too busy. They're time poor. They're doing all these things. And so I think, to come back to your question, I think all of these events, 2017 crypto hype, or Bitcoin specifically hype, then like beginning of 2020, this whole like day trading hype, and then now this whole Wall Street bets hype, it all, I think, were catalysts to the rise of the casual investor that we're seeing today. And I think the casual investor is here to stay. And the final point that I'll make here is the reason why this has been enabled is because there's been so many new tools and platforms that reduce the barriers to the entry, whether that is in the crypto space, whether that is by having neo brokers and who reduce the barriers to entry for good and for bad. But these tools have reduced the barrier to entry and have opened the gate, and a new cohort of investors have entered. And the way that we view this now is there's never been more retail investors' interest in the markets. I think I might be wrong, but I think just last year, 10 million new retail investors in the US entered into the market. And at the height of, I think, last summer, 25% of the overall trading volume came from retail investors. So massive. And I think at the same time, though, these people don't have an information source that they can go to because they have these different behaviors that I just described. And so that's what we with Finimize really, really want to help them, is being that modern mobile first information platform and community for the casual investor.
There is so much to unpack. Like you said, so many interesting things. So first of all, with respect to the sort of the crowd intelligence, that's a very interesting concept. And also, in a way, you could argue, whether the crowd is intelligent or no, or not, where the crowd decides to go, the market rise, because by sheer impact of numbers, that's going to happen. So sometimes as a society we do things that maybe is illogical, but nevertheless, if we all decide to buy lollipops tomorrow, the lollipop market is going to explode, like the fidget spinner. Suddenly it was cool, and it became like something incredible. So I think that's very interesting, the crowd point of view. With respect to your mission at Finimize, I think you have set yourself a very important mission, and I think that it's going to be increasingly difficult, but increasingly needed as a solution because of this kind of influence-based economy we live in. So Elon Musk tweets one thing, and suddenly you see a volatility of 10% or even more in whatever market he speaks about. And on the one hand, some argue, well, that is market manipulation. But on the other is like the guy's just expressing an opinion, the fact that there is like a cult around him. Should you make him guilty of that? I mean, I think it's a very hard balance to strike. So I think that actually my personal opinion is that it's very easy to blame other people. And I think it's very hard to improve yourself and your knowledge because it takes effort. So, but I think that ultimately, the responsibility should be attributed to the people. So you have the tools right now, you access them, you decide to access them. Those that you mentioned, like Robinhood. Here in Europe, there is eToro, which is very popular. And I think it's kind of your responsibility as a person to be informed of what you do. And of course, thankfully, there are tools out there that allow you to have this to do that in 15 minutes, but the people that read content or are actively involved in like the 15 minutes read, I don't think those are the type of people that end up complaining about, but this person said like that, or generating this toxic content online. I think that trolls are now like an integral part of any community, and I think it's just part of it. So, but I'm very hopeful, and I do think that there are a lot of casual investors, as you say, which again, like the term itself, I love because it reflects exactly what the movement is about. But I also think that counterintuitively, the casual investor is more engaged in the financial market than the traditional investor. Is like at least in terms of like the everyday person that has a 9 to 5 9 to 5 job, put the money in his pension, and then suddenly one day he wakes up and the money is gone, or the money is not what he expected. And I think hopefully that will produce better outcome. But at the end of the day, you could encapsulate all of this again by saying that finance is now exciting. Finance is now an integral part of pop culture. And these kind of events, like the Wall Street bet and GameStop and Robinhood, I think what happens also, it's kind of a catalyst because, and again, we mentioned briefly before, people are able, thanks to these tools that give them access to the financial market, to become part of the conversation. It doesn't matter if it is by virtue of holding one share, but they are part of it. So when you see like the news start hitting the tabloid, almost in a fashion like on a Twitch stream where you donate money to a gamer so that you get a recognition or you get like a shout out, which is a very powerful form of engagement and recognition at a psychological level with that dopamine release and all of that. I think that similarly, these events like the Wall Street bets and Robinhood and GameStop, this is an event that is going to an extent, it's going to go down in history. And people are oh, I was part of that. I purchased like a GameStop share. I was part of that conversation, and it's almost an in between, the fear of missing out and wanting to be a part of what's affecting the world. I think it's kind of an interesting balance. But one question that I have, and I'm worried about the time because we've already been here for some time, but and I would continue for the whole day. But one question that I have is, Finimize was very able. I mean, um, you were very successful in, so be it by a mix of necessity, luck, intuition, as strategy, but you were very successful in kind of placing yourself in such a competitive like, in establishing yourself as a in this kind of space, in the bite-sized information newsletter based kind of community. How do you go from here? Because of course now I guess that at Finimize you're thinking about, okay, how do I place myself so to be as relevant as today, if not more, in the next 10 years or 5 years? Maybe 10 years will be too long, but is that something that you're actively thinking about?
I think we're very actively thinking about it. I think the way we think about it is, like I said, our mission is we want to empower people to become their own financial advisors. And ultimately, the way we think about that is, can we help you make smarter investment and financial decisions? And I think content for us is obviously a key part of that, but I think it's not everything. If you go and you go to an investment advisor, for example, they give you market analysis and stuff like that, but they also give you a lot of data, or they also let you transact with them. And so I think we're very much thinking about, like, where can we add more value, whether that is on the analysis side and getting more data into our experience, or whether it is if our users tell us, hey, we would love to also transact on your platform, we would consider that. Right now, I think we're very much focused on helping people discover new investing trends and opportunities, and that's something that we know people already do use our platform for. And then the second step is, once you have an idea, how do you actually validate it and get the proof points? And so we're currently exploring ways how we can bring proof points into our mobile and also web applications.
That's so exactly one of the things that you touched upon is kind of where I wanted to go is, you have a very large community, you provide a very interesting breakdown. Right now, if I wanted to act upon the information that you provide, although it's not investment advice, I'd have to basically go on different platform, which perhaps I don't trust as much as I trust you. So is that so? Well, you confirmed basically just in your previous answer, but I think I was wondering whether you're considering providing a trading outlet. I think that could be very interesting.
I think we're the way that we think about it is, we just want to listen to our users, and if our users tell us that that's something that they want, we would definitely look into it. I'm not saying that we're going to do it. I think there are some downsides to it, where we would lose a lot of the independence that we have. People might think that we're producing content in order to make you transact, which is obviously not what we want to do. But there was a great quote once, I think, from Jack Dorsey, when he talked about how they built Twitter, and he said, hey, we built the core product and then we just listened. And then when they started to listen, they started to find things like the hashtag. They started to find things like the Twitter threads. All these features that today make up the core part of the platform came from their users. And that's a similar approach to what we're taking, is we've built the core product and now we're listening and seeing where people want us to build.
That's very much a design-based sort of like UX design-based product development rather than I'd say a financial services kind of product
Yeah,
development. It's very
yeah,
interesting.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Look, Max, I have one last question, if it's okay,
Hmm.
if you have another minute.
Yes.
Now there is a rise, of course, as we discussed, in crypto and the NFTs. Is that an area that you intend to expand in terms of, because I've noticed by reading the newsletter that you're starting to cover more and more also the crypto kind of
Hmm.
side. Is
Hmm.
that something that you plan on expand in the coming month or years, or you want to stay, more so on the traditional form of financial services?
No, I think definitely that's something that we will expand into. I think one of the key tenets that we have is we want to be community informed in what we
Mhm.
produce. And so our community is interested in crypto. And so as a result, we're gonna lean into that again,
Yeah,
and produce more around that for sure, 100%, both on the content and also on the event meetup side.
yeah.
Just recently, I think just 2 days ago, we released a fantastic event around Bitcoin, and we recorded it and edited it and produced it to higher audio quality. So you can find that in our app. But yeah, short answer is 100%.
That's amazing. And these events that you hold are virtual events at present because of
Yes.
COVID, or
Yeah.
okay? Do
Because
you
of COVID.
also
Yeah.
have physical? Do
We
you
used
also
to. Yeah.
have?
We used to.
Mhm.
Everything used to be offline physical meetups. And now everything is virtual.
Yeah,
Um,
Clubhouse could be also, although it
yeah, we have
limits
every
access.
Thursday, actually,
Ah, yeah.
every Thursday we host the Finimize Clubhouse at 6 p.m. GMT.
I'm gonna follow you. Actually,
Yeah,
I'm gonna.
tomorrow is the next one. It's always me, then our VP of community, and one of our analysts, and we talk
I'm
about
gonna
what
join
happened.
100%.
We talk
Uh,
about what happened in the stock markets or in the finance world that week. It's a lot of fun. You should definitely join.
yeah, yeah. I'll join and I'll insert the link. I think I can insert the link on like the. I don't know. Can you insert
Yeah,
the link to a room,
there's a
or you
link.
can?
Yeah, we have
There's
a
a
link.
link
Yeah.
to. Okay. Would you mind, like, if you send it over to me, I'll insert it at the bottom of like
Yeah,
I'll put it
awesome.
in
Yeah,
the
we'll do.
description.
Yeah.
Max, thank you so much for coming. On Blockchain Rock. Thank you for your time. I thoroughly enjoyed this chat. It's great to speak with people around the same age that are as excited about technological innovation and about the financial market. As you can tell, I'm a fan of your product, and
Thank you.
I wish you much success with what's coming next.
Yeah, thanks so much. I really enjoyed it, and sorry again about the tangent around virtual reality and
I
augmented
loved it.
reality. But I loved it. Well, yeah. So thanks for the interesting conversation.
Thank you, everyone. See you next week.